So welcome back to the Web3 Insights, where we dive into the most exciting innovations in blockchain and Web3. I'm your host, Aaron Hayhurst, and today I'm joined by Henri Lieutau, who is head of ecosystem at Starknet Foundation. In this episode, we're going to break down zero-knowledge proofs in simple terms, which I'm sure will be fantastic for a lot of the audience. Explore what makes what it takes, should I say, to build a sustainable Web3 ecosystem, and discuss the challenges of launching products in Web3. We're also going to be diving into major development related into Bitcoin, how Starknet is actively working on extending Bitcoin's computing capacity to enable rollups on Bitcoin alongside Ethereum. Whether you're a developer, entrepreneur, or just curious about the future of blockchain, this episode is going to give you a deeper understanding of how Starknet is shaping the next generation of decentralized applications. So let's get started. Henri, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Aaron.
Fantastic. Henri, just to start, it'd be great if you probably just give a very quick introduction into how you got to where you are today and got into Web3.
Sure, happy to. So my name is Henri Lieutau. I'm the head of ecosystem at the Starknet Foundation. I'm an engineer by trade. I studied engineering and business administration. And after some time in telecommunication, I just stumbled more or less on blockchain and got fascinated by it. So little by little, I started getting involved in the space. I like tinkering, so I tried a lot of stuff to understand the tech better and try things with it. And little by little, moved on from doing small startups, doing consulting for big companies, to eventually joining Starkware, which is a company developing Starknet. And then after a couple of years at Starkware, when Starknet was ready to move on to the next step of its evolution and the Starknet Foundation was created, I joined the foundation to try to develop the ecosystem better from that entity.
Amazing. Do you know what? It's so interesting how many people say they stumbled into blockchain. I was exactly the same.
Well, specifically, it's literally stumbling. I was the first time I heard about it was because, of news articles about the Silk Road and everything. And then I discarded it because it was just a vehicle for speculation. And then a few years later, a teacher at university mentioned, in a very different context, mentioned something like, yeah, maybe Web3 is the future of something. And I was like, nah, this is bullshit. But you know what? I'm an engineer. Let me check why this is bullshit.
Yeah.
So I double clicked on it and it wasn't.
No, absolutely. Looking at zero-knowledge proofs, this can be a pretty complicated topic. Can you break this down in a simple way? Imagine you're explaining it to someone completely new to blockchain.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, funny enough, zero-knowledge proofs were kind of the same thing for me, the same process. I had heard about them for a long time. I knew they were serious, but it was too complicated and I really didn't understand how they work. But once I got this initial insight in, I was like, oh wow, wait, this is super meaningful and it's way beyond blockchain. So in simple terms, zero-knowledge proofs are a mathematical tool or a computational tool that allow you to run a program, and once you've run your program, generate what is called a proof of running the program. So think of it as a value, right? The number. And once you have this number and the output of your program, so for example, say you calculated, you made a fancy equation and you have the result. You send me the result as well as the proof, and on my end, I have another program which I can run, and it will tell me, yes, Aaron ran the program correctly, and this is the result of the equation. Now, and that's it. That's really what it is. It allows you to run a program, and it allows me to use the output of your program and to be sure that you ran the program correctly without having to run it myself.
Yeah.
That's really all it is. Where this is magical is in two ways. First of all, it's the first context where you can actually do this. Up until that point, you couldn't do this. Like if you ask somebody to run a program for you, you had to trust them that they would run the program correctly. Whereas with this tool, you can have mathematical guarantee that the program was run correctly, even if you don't run it. So it is something that is very, very new. The second aspect where they're magical is that there is an asymmetry between the computing power required for you to run the program and for me to verify your proof. It is, if you're running a program, right, and it's a big program, it is very easy for me to verify the proof. So it allows me to delegate big computations to you that I can't run on my laptop, but I can still verify the proof on my laptop or on my phone. So it enables me with a very small machine to keep you in check and to make sure that you with a big server farm are running the computation correctly. There's another aspect of ZK proofs, which is a bit magical, which is I don't have to know everything that went into generating your proof before I'm able to use it. So you could run your proof with private input, right? With a secret, for example, you don't want to share to me. And I know you have the secret without knowing what the secret is. So these two aspects of ZK proof in general make a lot of people think about what they could be building with it. And if you want to be very specific, you may have heard of zero knowledge proofs and validity proofs. For all intent and purposes, in most cases, they're more or less the same, but one is more privacy preserving, the zero knowledge proof, and is focused on keeping information private, whereas the validity proof aspect, the validity proofs, are focused on keeping the asymmetry optimal, meaning making it as easy for me to verify your work and as easy for you to run any program you may want to run. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm keen to understand what makes them such a game changer for scalability and privacy, beyond just the technical side. Why should the average Web3 user or developer care about zero knowledge proofs?
They probably won't really, because it's a backend technology, right? It's not something that will be, well, I mean, in the first phase, it's not going to be super user facing in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
So why is it impactful for Web3? Is because up until these things were shipped to production, all of Web3 was based on replication of computation. When you think about it, why the way Bitcoin works or the way Ethereum works is that you and I have shared understanding of the world because you and I are running a node and we're running the same software to verify all the transactions that ever happened in Ethereum and in Bitcoin. That's how those things work, right? You can be your own bank, you can be your own auditor because you run the software and you know what goes into a Bitcoin block because you've checked it. Does that ring a bell? That's exactly the same paradigm I described earlier, right? You want to have a guarantee of the output of the system, so you run it yourself. Now, the reason Bitcoin and Ethereum don't scale very well today, I mean, they scale very well until the criteria that the developers of those networks or the communities of those networks tend to push, which is they want people to be able to stake at home or they want people at home to be able to run a Bitcoin node. And instinctively, you can understand why this thing doesn't scale to billions of users. Do you think on your laptop you can run the same payload, the same level of activity that Visa does on their own server? Most likely not.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a very big machine. Recording podcast is very compute heavy, but I doubt that you can run Visa's workload on your laptop. So that's why you have this trade-off between how much people you accommodate on the network and how many people can actually audit the network in real time. Well, zero knowledge proof introduced the possibility for some people to run the computation on very big machines, think Solana-like machines or even bigger, and instead of other people having to rerun the same computation to have a guarantee that the state of the world is correct, these people who are running the big computation can just generate a proof that they did so correctly, that everything that went into a block is a valid transaction, that the way the block was computed was done correctly. They can provide that proof to much smaller players. And now you have a context where you can have people using very big server farm providing services to people using their mobile phone. Another way I like to put it is that validity proofs do to computation what mining does to security in Bitcoin, for example. You don't have to run a huge Bitcoin mining farm to know that the work done by miners is correct. You can check it yourself on your end. Well, this is the same thing, except instead of being used for security, it's used for computation and for calculation. So it affects Web3 users because it will enable blockchain networks that are trustless and much, 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 much more powerful.
Yeah.
Then the second wave of innovation will come on the side of what is called client-side proving, meaning it will enable app developers to have computation happen outside the chain and be used inside the chain. So let me give you an example of that. Today, if you want to have a trustless smart contract, it's better to have all the computation executed on chain. Because if you don't, then you have the Oracle problem, meaning you need an input from the outside and the chain can't have a guarantee that the data is correct, except if the chain executed themselves. So for example, let's say you have an AI model that you want to use to you have an arbitrage DAO, and you want to use the output of an AI model to rebalance it. Today, you use this output and you trust somebody to run the AI correctly outside. Tomorrow, you could imagine running the AI agent, the AI inferences on chain. Now that will be very costly. And also maybe your AI agent, you don't want to publish it on chain, right? If you're the developer, you want to keep your secret sauce, but you want to give your users the guarantee that you use the AI agent correctly. So what do you do in that case? Well, you execute the AI agent on your side, on your computer, without publicizing it on chain. You generate a proof that you did, and then you use that proof into the smart contract. So you get to have computation that is trustless, but that can be executed outside the chain. And that will start with developers generating proofs on their backend, and it will evolve eventually to you generating proofs in your browser of stuff you're doing or information you hold, and being able to leverage this on chain.
Awesome. Yeah, it's definitely exciting. Starknet obviously is a leader in zero knowledge rollups as well. Can you explain how these rollups help scale Ethereum and
Absolutely.
improve transaction efficiency?
Yep. So the way a rollup like Starknet works is the following. Starknet is a blockchain. It has blocks, it has transactions, it has wallets, right? So the way you interact with it is very similar to the way you interact with any other blockchain. The key difference between Ethereum and another the key difference between Starknet and another layer 1 is that for any transaction that goes into a Bitcoin block, for any Starknet block that is processed through the system, a validity proof is generated. So you can have a proof that everything that went into the block was done correctly, that the operators to the network, which are called sequencers, did everything according to the code. And this guarantee is, again, mathematical. It's not a matter of all the sequencers signing to say, yes, we behave correctly. It's mathematical proof that everything was executed as planned. Mm-hmm. And those proofs don't live on their own outside for people to verify. They are verified by Ethereum. And what I mean by Ethereum, I mean inside a smart contract on Ethereum. Remember that verifying is just writing a computer program, right? So you could write a verifier inside a smart contract on Ethereum. You could. We did. That's literally what it is. Every few hours, a set of Starknet proofs are sent to Ethereum, and the smart contract on Ethereum verifies that the Starknet network behaves correctly, and then proceeds to exchange information between Ethereum and Starknet. You can kind of think of it as two blockchains trustlessly talking to each other, which is a fascinating concept. There's no really, when blockchains need to exchange information, they have to trust the humans that are in between to pass the message correctly and sign the message correctly. Here, Ethereum understands Starknet. It doesn't understand everything that's in it, but it understands that everything happened correctly. It understands that it's healthy and that it sends some messages, and vice versa. And so those ZK rollups enable to scale Ethereum because they piggyback on the security of Ethereum. As long as Ethereum is safe, Starknet is safe, but they do give users of Ethereum a way to opt in to a place where they can do transactions for fractions of a penny and fractions of a second. And so that's why it's cool. It's the same level of security. It's the same ecosystem, but much, much higher throughput.
Amazing stuff. There's been a lot of recent research on extending Bitcoin's computing power to enable rollups on Bitcoin. I've done some podcasts with some of these as well. I understand Starknet is actively involved in this effort as well. Can you explain what this means and why it's such a big deal at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So Starknet, the network, is not involved in anything because Starknet is a network, right? How can it be involved with anything? But so at the Starknet Foundation, we're monitoring this closely because it's fascinating and incredibly exciting to us. And Starkware, the development company of Starknet, is looking and funding development and research into what can be done with it. So collectively, we're actively involved. Yeah. So what does it mean? What exactly is happening? Bitcoin for a very long time has been considered a dummy chain, meaning you can move value around, but that's about what you can do with it, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the assumption most people had up until recently.
Mm-hmm.
And then not so long ago, people started thinking, well, Bitcoin does have some smart contract capacity. Bitcoin has some features that could enable people to run deeper code, more complex code on it. Is there any way we can do with Bitcoin the same thing that you can do on Ethereum? The short answer is no. Right now, it's not possible. Verifying a ZK proof on Bitcoin is still way too complicated. But people are looking deep into the instruction set of Bitcoin and figuring out, hey, maybe if we add this thing here, we could have something that starts making sense and that can start operating ZK rollup on top. So specifically, Bitcoin misses two main features. One is the capacity to verify a ZK proof, right? That's one. And then the second thing it misses is something called covenants, or in another way, it misses something to determine from spending a transaction to determine what goes into spending the next one, which is something that matters a lot for ZK rollups because, for example, let's say you and I deposit one ETH into a ZK rollup and then eventually we do some stuff and then I want to withdraw that ETH. I need Ethereum to be able to say, yes, okay, so now Henry gets back his ETH and Aaron still has one ETH on chain. So you need Ethereum to be able to have some notion of state or some notion of after that transaction, the next transaction will only be able to spend one ETH, right? Something like this. And Bitcoin doesn't have that yet. It doesn't have this capacity. So there are, sorry?
No, go on, sorry.
And so these things are called covenants, right? And so there's active discussion in Bitcoin land and in the Bitcoin community to figure out whether this can be done, to figure out whether this is worth it, to figure out whether there are risks associated to that. So Starkware is financing this research. They are actively pushing so that people just open that box. Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? What are the upside? What are the downside? And the reason we're doing it is that it's incredibly exciting to start being able to think about scaling Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is a fascinating network. It's a fascinating technical creature. It still is the biggest network around. It has a ton of value locked in it. It has a ton of users. It has a ton of penetration. And if we can extend it also and offer additional features on top of it, I mean, the Bitcoin and Ethereum are the financial rails of tomorrow. It sounds very cheesy to say it, but sometimes going back to the basic enables you to understand why you get excited about stuff, right? So being able to tap into existing financial rails, existing financial rails as in the Bitcoin rails, is something that's incredibly exciting for us.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the directions obviously you're looking at is settling transactions on both Bitcoin and Ethereum. How would this work? And, what kind of impact as well would this have on Bitcoin's role in DeFi?
Absolutely. Well, I'll preface this by saying that all of this is relatively, still research, right? So things may change, things may not happen. So I'll share the excitement. I'll share what I like about it, but take it with a grain of salt. And
for sure,
it's not it doesn't exist until it's on mainnet. Right? Always keep this in mind. But the way we're looking at it is we're looking at how we can structure Starknet so that part of its state is settled on Bitcoin and part of its state is settled on Ethereum. Without going too much into detail, you can imagine it as a shards of the same network. I know people are familiar with shards, so I like that term. It's not exactly that, but imagine two shards of Starknet, but every time you do a transaction on either you can communicate within the same transaction with the other shard on the other side. So you could have a transaction that interacts with both Bitcoin and Ethereum in the same block. For all intent and purposes, it's the same network, but part of it lives on Bitcoin and part of it lives on Ethereum, right? So you could have a network that is secured by both while keeping proper segregation of the two network. And there would be proofs of Starknet going down to Ethereum every now and then, and there could be proofs of Starknet going down every now and then to Bitcoin. Now, why is this exciting? Well, first of all, it would be one of the first layer 2s on top of Bitcoin, where you could bridge your Bitcoin to a place where you can do transactions in less than 10 minutes, which is in and of itself something crazy, right?
Yeah.
It would be the first context where you can do trustless transactions between ETH and Bitcoin. Think about it. We've been here for 15 years, right? I mean, Bitcoin has existed for 15 years, Ethereum for about 10. It is still impossible to make transactions, like to exchange a Bitcoin and an ETH without a middleman in the middle. There's just no way to do it. It's crazy, right? And this would enable this kind of stuff. So even just those very basic stuff would be incredibly exciting. I'm also particularly excited about the capacity. Once you have a ZK rollup, you can have, transactions are much cheaper. So you could enable people to have wallets with fractions of a Bitcoin. Today, you can own a fraction of a Bitcoin, but it's really hard to hold it yourself because it's very expensive. So you go through custodians. In that case, you would enable people to own fractions of a Bitcoin and very small ones while being self-custodial. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, no, definitely sounds it. Let's move on then from zero knowledge to looking at Web3 ecosystem. You wrote about building a sustainable Web3 ecosystem. What are the key principles that help an ecosystem thrive long term in this space?
Yeah, I think when you're building an ecosystem in Web3, you have to keep in mind that this is uncharted territory. We're not sure where we're going, right? Web3 is still very young. There's still a lot of things to evolve, and those technologies will evolve and mature over the next 10, 20, probably 50 years, right? I mean, the web is still evolving. So why would blockchain be figured out in 10 years? And so you have to optimize for your network to be able to discover new trends and discover new paradigms and ship groundbreaking apps as early as possible. You need to make sure that the people who want to experiment and build new things have everything at their disposal to make it happen. So that means educational resources so that people can use the tool, but it also means educational resources for people who want to start businesses. There's a very high proportion of people who are very good at developing stuff, but not a very high proportion of people who are good at developing businesses. So you have to figure out a way to make sure that the innovation is not just innovation in and of itself. It's innovation that will lead to sustainable businesses that can then go on and be independent and have success using the network.
Yeah, no, for sure. Completely agree there. And what have been the biggest challenges and successes in growing, Starknet Foundation's ecosystem? How does your team support builders and developers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of our biggest success and our biggest challenge is that we've been extremely good at onboarding devs. I mean, if you look at, every now and then there's an Electric Capital report that goes out with dev adoption, and you can see that Starknet is always up there, right? We're always growing. There's a ton of devs coming in. And Starknet is not an EVM chain, right? You can't write code in the same way that you write code on Ethereum. It's a slightly different computing paradigm. So getting people to learn something that is not Solidity has been a major challenge, and we've been doing pretty good at this. We've been doing pretty good at getting people to learn it. So that has been a major success. We're very proud of this, and we have a very well identified road to get developers in and for them to understanding what Starknet is and how they can build cool shit on top of it. But that has also turned into a challenge because 99% of our community is devs. And at some point, you have too many devs. You never have too many devs, right? I mean, in absolute numbers, you never have too many devs. But in relative numbers, sometimes having too much of the same people is a problem because you need, it's like if you're running a bakery, right? If you have just flour, then you can make bread. But if you want to make more complex stuff, you need different kind of ingredients. And it's cool to make different kind of stuff, right? So in our case, right now we're focusing a lot on understanding what kind of different people we need in. And at this point, we're really targeting people with build intent, people who want to build businesses. And we are focusing on, okay, how do we solve their problem? How do we make it clear for them how they can get support from us? What kind of support do they need in the first place? And how do we help make that match happen with the people who are already in? So, yeah, that's in a nutshell what we're doing to support builders and developers.
Yeah, for sure. When looking for those type of developers as well, like what are the particular traits that you would look for that type of person who, is that type of builder that wants to come in and essentially like be someone that builds a business?
I think the most important thing at this stage, especially in early stage network, is people have to be willing to engage with other people. They have to be willing to ask for what they need. And not in a way of, hey, I need that, give me that. But they have to be able to express what they need. They have to understand, okay, so this is what's set, this is what is on my way, and this is what I need to solve. And be able to go to other people, whether it's us or it's Starkware or it's other community members, and being able to voice this, right? Being able to not stay in your own little Telegram channel, to not stay in your own Discord server thinking, oh, I'm not sure how I'm going to solve this, or, oh, this thing will resolve by itself, but being able to reach out to other people and explain, hey, this is what I'm working on. I need help on that.
Yeah.
Anything you can do. And like being able to communicate a lot with other people, I think is really key. And when you look at newcomers in the ecosystem, the people who have most success are the people who are able to weave those relationships the faster. That stands for developers and builders. Like if you are proactive, it's really, really fast to weave yourself into the ecosystem. But you have to be able to go talk with other people, which is not the case for later stage networks where you can just, sit by yourself, code, ship it, and be happy with it.
Yeah, of course. No, I think that's really great advice. Thanks. And also, what advice do you have for the projects looking to build on Starknet? What resources or funding opportunities are available? That's right.
So that's a great question. What advice do I have for projects looking to build on Starknet? First of all, I will say we're trying to make your life simple. So every initiative that we're organizing is meant to lead into the following one. And there's always something happening at some point. So if you want to get into the ecosystem, the first thing you should do is figure out whatever is happening in the ecosystem right now. What are the initiatives we're running? And join it. Don't think twice. Just register for it and figure it out. Now, we are very intent in providing the support we can to people. So that includes grants, and people tend to think about support equals grant. But I think support, like grant, is probably it's grease in a motor. It's not fuel in and of itself. Our goal is that people can grow by raising external funding, by creating businesses that are self-sustaining, and that's where we can add most value. So the advice I have for people looking to build on Starknet is, first of all, try to build a kick-ass project that people want to use, understand your users, be close to them, and then understand what it takes for you to be able to sustain your team for the next year, then the next 2 years, then the next 5 years. That probably means raising some funds at some point. So it's really important to start thinking about this early on. What is standing in your road of success? Don't think that things will resolve and money will just appear out of the sky. If we can help, we will. But you should be trying to build a business, not a charity.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. To finish up then, where do you see Web3 product development heading in the next 5 years? What are the major trends that builders should be preparing for?
So I have a funny answer and a boring answer. I'll start with the funny one, right? I think that there are a lot of really interesting directions that people are exploring right now, and some of them are very wild cards, and it's fascinating to me to think about this. One is in the realms of gaming, right? When you think about a game is a world in and of itself, right? I mean, a game there is a It's a digital world with its own set of rules and characters and resources, and that world runs on somebody's computer, right? And that person can stop that computer, and just the fact that it runs on somebody's computer means it's controlled by a human, right? And there are people who are trying to instantiate those worlds on a shared platform that can't be turned off, which is a blockchain. And that sounds dumb, because why would you put a game on chain? But likewise, having a bank live on chain used to sound very dumb, right? And banks used to live in somebody else's computer, and now we've brought them on chain and something happened. And I think people bringing video games and people bringing digital worlds into a uncensorable, long-lasting support is something that has incredible ramifications. It's really interesting to think about. So I'm really interested in fully on-chain games and autonomous worlds in general. I think that's a very fascinating discussion and direction. But I think it's still there's still a lot of values to be proven. That's for the funny answer. And there's plenty of different stuff that people are working on, right? This is not just the thing that people are working on, but it's one that gets me thinking.
Yeah.
The more boring answer is, I think with the recent change in administration in the US, it is likely that some regulations and some rules that have been out for some time will be revised. And I think that there are some use cases that are boring, but that we still haven't cracked, that will open up. And in particular, I think the time for payment has come. I think for the past 10 years, payments weren't really doable with a secure blockchain, right? You couldn't accommodate billions of people or even millions of people to transact daily on Ethereum or on Bitcoin. And now we're at a spot where you can do this in a secure way with ZK rollups. And you can likely do this because of business environment changes. And so I think that there's a huge room for improvement, and this is a place where you very likely see new players coming in the next 5 years, and you will start having it be tangible for people outside the blockchain, outside the blockchain microcosm, right? People will start using it. I think people will start using it without really realizing that they're using it. It's going to be like, most people don't understand that they use Linux every day because they don't use it directly. But the web runs on Linux. As soon as you use the web, you kind of use Linux. And I think it's going to be the same thing. As soon as you do a payment or transfer value, it is likely that you'll be using blockchain. And I think we're going to start seeing this in the next few years.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, it's definitely an exciting year ahead, and definitely an exciting next couple of years for sure. Henri, this has been a fascinating discussion, on zero knowledge proofs, and you really simplified that for us and for the audience, which is great. Looking at Web3 ecosystems and then launching products on the blockchain as well. So thank you so much for breaking all of this down in such an accessible way as well. For our listeners, if you do want to learn more about Starknet, the Starknet Foundation, visit starknet.io and check out their ecosystem for the latest developments. As always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Web3 Insights for more discussions with the pioneers shaping the decentralized world. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Thanks, Henri.
Thank you, Aaron.